history remembers science as humanity's greatest triumph. The force that pulled us out of darkness, cured diseases, and revealed the secrets of the universe. But buried beneath these victories lies a far more disturbing truth. Some of the most trusted scientific beliefs were catastrophically wrong. Not small errors. Not harmless misunderstandings. But mistakes so powerful, so convincing, that they shaped entire civilizations, and cost countless lives. There were moments when humanity followed science with absolute faith, only to walk directly into disaster. Doctors who believed they were healing, unknowingly spreading death. Engineers who trusted equations, only to unleash catastrophe. Entire generations raised on ideas that would later be proven deadly. The terrifying part is not that science can fail. It's that when it does, we rarely notice until it's too late. And by then, the damage is already written into history. In the mid-19th century, hospitals were places of hope and silent death. Women walked into maternity wards expecting to give life, and instead, many never walked out. The air smelled clean. The doctors were respected. The science was trusted. And yet, mortality rates in some hospitals were so high that giving birth at home was statistically safer than entering a medical institution. Something invisible was killing them. Something no one could see, no one could measure, and no one believed existed. At the time, the dominant scientific belief was clear and unquestioned. Disease was caused by bad air, by invisible vapors known as miasma. It was elegant. It was widely accepted. And it was completely wrong. Doctors moved confidently between patients, performing procedures, delivering babies, conducting autopsies, without washing their hands. After all, there was nothing to wash off. Nothing they could see. Nothing science had told them to fear. Then came a man who challenged everything. Ignaz Semmelweis. A physician who noticed a horrifying pattern. Women treated by doctors were dying at drastically higher rates than those treated by midwives. The difference was undeniable. The implications were terrifying. And the explanation, almost unthinkable. Semmelweis proposed that doctors themselves were carrying something from cadavers to living patients. Something microscopic. Something deadly. He ordered hand-washing with chlorinated solutions. Almost instantly, death rates plummeted. Lives were saved. The mystery, it seemed, was solved. But instead of being celebrated, Semmelweis was rejected. Mocked. Dismissed. Because his theory violated the accepted science of the time. There was no known mechanism. No visible proof. No theoretical foundation that made sense to his peers. So the medical community chose to ignore him. And people kept dying. This was not ignorance. It was something far more dangerous. It was the power of a scientific belief so dominant that even evidence could not break it. A system so confident in its own understanding that it refused to question itself, even in the face of death. The tragedy was not just the mistake, but the refusal to see it. And this was only the beginning. Across history, similar patterns would emerge again and again. Entire fields built on assumptions that seemed undeniable. Ideas taught as truth, enforced as fact, embedded into institutions and cultures. And yet, beneath the surface, something was always waiting. A flaw. A blind spot. A hidden error with consequences far beyond imagination. What makes these moments so terrifying is not that they happened in the past. It's that, at the time, no one believed they were wrong. The scientists were brilliant. The methods were logical. The conclusions were accepted. And still, they led humanity into disaster. So the question is no longer whether science can be wrong. The question is far more unsettling. How many of our truths today are waiting to become tomorrow's greatest mistakes? The most dangerous scientific mistakes are not born from stupidity. They are born from confidence. From elegant theories that explain just enough of reality to feel complete, while hiding the part that will eventually break everything. And nowhere was this more devastating than in the early 20th century, when humanity began to believe it had finally mastered the invisible forces of the atom. Radiation was discovered as a miracle. It glowed in the dark, defied understanding, and seemed to carry endless potential. Scientists and the public alike were captivated. Radium was infused into consumer products, advertised as a health enhancer, a beauty treatment, even a source of vitality. Toothpaste, water, cosmetics, all promising energy, longevity, and strength. The logic felt sound. If small amounts of radiation could stimulate cells, then more must be better. It was a perfect illusion. And it was catastrophically wrong. In factories across America, young women known as the Radium Girls painted watch dials with luminous paint, using fine brushes tipped with their lips to keep them sharp. Day after day, they ingested tiny amounts of radium. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Then the symptoms began. Teeth loosened. Jaws decayed. Bones fractured from within. Their bodies, unknowingly, had become radioactive. The very substance believed to give life was silently dismantling it. The mechanism behind this tragedy was invisible at the time, but brutally precise. Radium behaves chemically like calcium, the element that strengthens our bones. When ingested, it is absorbed into the skeleton, embedding itself deep within the body. But unlike calcium, radium emits continuous radiation, bombarding surrounding tissues with energy strong enough to destroy cells, damage DNA, and trigger cancers. It doesn't stop. It doesn't fade. It turns the body itself into a slow, internal weapon. What made this mistake so deadly was not just ignorance, but timing. The discovery of radioactivity had outpaced the understanding of its biological effects. Science had unlocked a force before it understood the cost of touching it. And because early results seemed harmless, the danger remained hidden until it was far too late. But this was not an isolated event. The same pattern repeated in other forms, sometimes even more catastrophic. In the 1950s and 60s, a drug called thalidomide was prescribed to pregnant women as a treatment for nausea. It was tested. It was approved. It was considered safe. Yet thousands of children were born with severe deformities. Limbs missing. Organs malformed. Lives permanently altered before they even began. The science had overlooked a critical variable: the way the drug interfered with embryonic development. These were not random failures. They reveal a deeper mechanism within science itself. A system that builds knowledge step by step, but is always vulnerable to what it cannot yet see. When evidence is incomplete, when testing is limited, when assumptions go unchallenged, even the most logical conclusions can become deadly. And here lies the twist. The more advanced science becomes, the more complex its blind spots grow. Each discovery opens new doors, but also new risks, hidden in dimensions we don't yet understand. The question is no longer about past mistakes. It's about the ones we are making right now, without even knowing it. By the late 20th century, humanity believed it had learned its lesson. Regulations tightened. Testing improved. Scientific skepticism became a virtue. And yet the pattern did not disappear. It evolved. Because the most unsettling truth about scientific error is this: it doesn't vanish with knowledge. It adapts to it. It hides deeper, in places that feel even more certain, even more controlled. Consider the Challenger disaster in 1986. A spacecraft, the pride of human engineering, rising into the sky under the eyes of millions. Every calculation had been checked. Every system reviewed. The science was sound. And yet, 73 seconds after launch, it exploded. The cause was eventually traced to a small failure, a rubber O-ring that lost flexibility in cold temperatures. Engineers had warned about the risk. Data existed. But the system, confident in its own history of success, normalized the anomaly. It turned uncertainty into acceptable risk. And in doing so, it sealed its fate. This is the hidden danger that persists across all scientific fields. Not just error, but the normalization of it. When a system works often enough, small warnings begin to feel insignificant. Deviations become routine. And slowly, almost invisibly, the threshold of danger shifts. What once would have stopped everything becomes something we learn to live with. Until one day, It crosses a line we didn't realize we had moved. Now extend this pattern into the present. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, climate manipulation, fields advancing faster than any in history. Each promises solutions, progress, transformation. And each operates at a scale where mistakes are no longer local. They are global. Irreversible. Embedded into systems that define how humanity itself will evolve. We are once again standing at the edge of knowledge, touching forces we only partially understand. And like those before us, we trust the models, the data, the consensus. Because that is what science demands. But history whispers a warning: consensus has been wrong before. Repeatedly. And when it was, the consequences were not theoretical. They were human. The terrifying implication is not that science fails. It's that it must fail in order to progress. Every breakthrough is built on layers of incomplete understanding. Every certainty rests on assumptions that have not yet been broken. Which means, somewhere in our current knowledge, there are ideas we trust completely, that will one day be revealed as dangerous illusions. And we will not recognize them immediately. That is the price of discovery. We often imagine history as a straight line of progress, a steady climb toward truth. But in reality, it is something far more fragile. A path shaped by correction, by error, by moments where humanity believed it had finally arrived, only to realize it had misunderstood everything. And perhaps the most humbling realization of all is this: the scientists of the past were not careless. They were not foolish. They were us. Brilliant. Confident. Certain. Standing on the edge of the unknown, believing they understood it. Just as we do now. Because the greatest mistake in the history of science may not be behind us. It may be the one we haven't discovered yet.